Hello and welcome. I am Annette Reeder from thebiblicalnutritionist.com, enjoying serving you God's recipe for excellent health. Well, today, the part of the recipe that we're going to talk about is depression, anxiety, and eating disorders. And that's just a lot of information to put out there on the table in front of you, but yet so many of you are dealing with it that we need to address it. And in order to address it in a really good way, so you can have a lot of good take home with you, a lot of good takeaway, I'm interviewing Dr. Shawn Talbott. I've come to know Dr. Sean Talbot just in the last year and a half as I've transitioned from focusing on health with basic supplements to actually health with healing the gut. The information is just exploding. The science is exploding. Every week, I can open up more nutritional journals and see more and more studies that are coming out to reveal how depression, anxiety, and eating disorders actually are beginning in the gut. And we need to correct that. So I can't wait to get started with this interview. Before I do, though, be sure and recognize that this video and this podcast is sponsored by biblicalnutritionacademy.com. You see, we are here to teach you eating, praying, and fasting. And on that biblicalnutritionacademy.com website, you will find all of our courses to help you dive deep into God's word, dive deep into how to pray without overcomplicating it, how to dive deep into fasting so you get the results you're looking for, both spiritually and physically, and how to eat. Such a very simplistic thing that we do every day, but yet man has complicated it so that you need all of these textbooks behind me to understand it all. Well, not really. All we needed was God's word. So let me go ahead and get started with my interview with Dr. Shawn Talbott. He is the Chief Science Officer with a company called Amari. He does research and development for producing products that help us to get the health we're looking for. But I learned about Dr. Shawn Talbott when I was in college because several of the textbooks I was studying from were from him. So he started in the information, the education arena, moved into the Olympic arena, helping with the sports athletes. And now he's into research and development for gut-brain axis connection. So this is a great interview, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Welcome, Dr. Shawn. I am excited to have you with us today. And so much I want to ask you because there's so many questions out there. But first, let me just say welcome to the Biblical Nutritionist.
Thanks a lot, Annette. It's great to be here with you. And I know you're going to ask some good questions.
Well, I do have a lot of questions for you. I just don't know if we have enough time in a day to get all of the information out for people to understand. So, there's just so much about the gut and brain connection, the vagus nerve, all of that. It's just exploding science as what you've taught me as well. I mean, I changed from a very profitable business to this because I realize what's happening in the gut-brain connection. And so I want people to also get that same understanding how it's all connected. And today I kind of wanted to focus on a couple different things. So many of my clients in the inner circle and those in our courses are saying, yeah, but I've got this depression and I've got this anxiety. And then I kind of want us to take that, well, I've got other people saying, but I've got this eating disorder. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you, the specialist of the hour, help us out with this. Where are things starting and how are they getting to such an escalated level that we're dealing with so many issues?
Yeah, that's a great question and a big question, right? So, you're absolutely right that the idea around what's happening in the gut and how that affects every aspect of human health and behavior, not just how we feel, but what our physical health is, even what our longevity might be. I mean, the science is exploding around this idea of the gut-brain axis, and specifically the microbiome, the bacteria in our gut. This idea that how we feel is not just in our head, it's partly in our head, but it's predominantly in our gut, what we call the second brain. And so when we talk to people about mental wellness issues like depression and anxiety and burnout and just plain old garden variety stress, or we talk to them about sort of like these behavioral issues like where their appetite signals are coming from or where they're not coming from if they're having an eating disorder. Those kinds of things are actually in large part derived from the gut, because your gut is the source of the majority of our neurotransmitters. So we know most of our serotonin that's involved in happiness is made in the gut, something like 90 to 95%. Most of our dopamine, around 70%, that helps us with motivation, made in the gut. Most of our GABA that helps us relax, made in the gut. And then there's all sorts of other signaling molecules, short chain fatty acids that are involved in metabolism and blood sugar control and insulin sensitivity. And the list goes on and on and on. We're really, really thinking of the gut as this kind of unappreciated organ. For so many years, we thought it was just there to digest and absorb our food. And now we're viewing it as this endocrine organ that's producing neurotransmitters and hormones and signaling molecules. And it's a really, really new, like, fundamental shift in all of science and medicine. It's really, really exciting.
So every Friday, I do this grocery store discovery video. And in each video, I'm in the grocery store talking about different foods. And I keep telling them, this is going to help create short chain fatty acids. I keep saying, this is going to help build the microbiome. Right. So what you're teaching them tonight is, okay, now he's taken what Annette's been teaching us to a new level, because you just threw in every one of the words that I say. And now you're connecting it. So I really love this, and especially how you're connecting it to the hormones, to the endocrines, which is the same thing, and bringing this to a level that we can all say, aha, I knew there was something there. So tell us more.
Yeah. So what you're teaching people is the practical aspect of that. So it's one thing to be curious and excited and go, ooh, that's really interesting. The bacteria in my gut send these signals to my brain. Oh, interesting. But it's a whole nother level when you can actually go into the grocery store and pick up a head of beautiful dark green lettuce, for example, and you can say, if I eat this, I'm going to nourish a particular class of bacteria in my gut. And as a result of that, those bacteria are going to produce this thing that's going to help me feel better and perform better. That's where it becomes super exciting, because now that really interesting science has been applied to your life. And so we can, the science is actually progressing at such a rapid pace that we can start to get really precise with our recommendations. And we can say to people, this kind of fruit is going to grow this kind of bacteria, and that's going to produce this kind of chemical, and that's going to lead you to feel this way. And then this other one's going to feed this other bacteria that produces another chemical that'll make you feel the other way. And like we're right on the cusp of being able to use, there's this whole new field that's developing called nutritional psychology, that's using nutrition to change how we feel and behave and think and show up in the world in all these various ways.
Okay, I like this. So let's start with depression and anxiety. Tell us how it would work in that situation.
Yeah, so if and there's really good research to support this, really good, well-controlled clinical trials to show if you're eating a certain way, let's say the standard American diet, and I know you cringe when I say that, standard American diet, right? Lots of processed food, lots of sugar, lots of hamburgers and French fries and sodas and things like that. Standard American diet, SAD, right? Mm-hmm. That diet has been clinically documented to lead people towards depression. And there's one aspect of it that it's an inflammatory diet, and it's not good for your blood sugar control and like the sort of hardcore metabolism. And that's all true. But the other part of it is that diet will nourish a class of bacteria that sends signals throughout the rest of your body that lead you to be depressed. And so some of the signals can actively lead you to be more depressed, like inflammatory markers like cytokines. Some of it is the lack of good chemicals like serotonin and dopamine. So you're getting these bad chemicals that make you feel sad. You're not getting enough of the good chemicals that make you feel happy, so you're in a bad state. But we can completely change that around by eating the good foods, the same kind of foods that you recommend, the brightly colored fruits and vegetables and high fiber, and avoid as much as you can the processed. Now that's going to, because you're not eating the standard American diet, you're going to starve out those bad bacteria. And because you're eating more of the brightly colored fruits and vegetables and the high fiber foods, you're going to nourish a whole different class of bacteria that produce more serotonin, so you're happier, and more dopamine, so you're motivated, and more GABA, so you can relax when you want to. And by doing that, what you do is you build this internal pharmacy, so to speak, that is not just naturally producing what you need, but producing what you need when you need it in the right amounts for whatever situation that you're in. So I mean, that should sound like science fiction to people the first couple of times that they hear it. But then if they ever dig into the science a little bit, or if they try it themselves, they'll feel it. But the science is just supporting this over and over and over again from laboratories all over the world.
Yeah, I so agree. Just because what I've experienced in my own life, it's amazing, the transformation. Right. So, okay, so those people that are watching and listening, and we have followers around the world, which is amazing, but yet they've been diagnosed with depression or anxiety, and they're already on a medication. So how do they take what you're teaching them and what I teach them in the grocery store? How do they apply that and say, you know what, I'm afraid to get off my medication, but yet I believe in what you're saying? How do they apply what you're saying?
Right. That's a fantastic question, because there are millions and millions and millions of people who are in exactly that situation. Because prior to this science that we're talking about the microbiome and the gut-brain axis, the only solution that was really on offer for people who were struggling with any sort of a mood issue was a pharmaceutical option, was to say, to take this synthetic chemical, this one synthetic chemical, and it's gonna solve your problem. And of course, it doesn't do that. It might mask some of the problems. It might make you feel less bad in certain ways, but it certainly doesn't make you feel good. And so this science is perfectly applicable to somebody who's on one of those pharmaceutical regimens. And the way that we tell people is, you know, don't throw away your pharmaceutical and say, I'm gonna cure this with salad now, right? It's not that sort of a thing. But as people start to eat better, as people start to get these nutrients into their bodies that have these signaling effects that we're talking about, they're gonna start feeling better noticeably in ways that are different than how that medication makes them feel. And so I tell people all the time, you're going to notice yourself having less tension and less stress and better resilience, and your brain fog will lift, and all these kinds of signals that we see in our clinical trials of these diets. And once you start to experience that is a great excuse for you then to go visit with your prescriber and say, you know what, I started eating better. I started supplementing maybe with some of these fibers and phytonutrients and things like that. And as a result of that, I feel better. Let's look at my medication regimen. Is it appropriate for us to drop one of these down to a lower dose, or drop one out completely? And that's going to be a very individualized situation for people, but we see it all the time. Doctors actually will use these approaches, these natural approaches now, because the science is so good, to do what they call step down therapy, to take somebody from, let's say 100 milligrams down to 75 milligrams, down to 50 milligrams, down to 25 milligrams. And all the way along, they're just checking to make sure you're still doing good. Are you still feeling good? And a lot of times we see people feeling better and better and better as their drug regimen is coming down, because their body is taking care of a lot of these mood states naturally now.
Yeah. And such a beautiful scenario too, because they become the person they were meant to be versus this person that they've been drugged to become. And it's just so beautiful when they get to feel and act like the person they meant to be.
Right. And people become a better version of themselves. This is one of the great things I love about studying mood state for so many years, is that you can see somebody get better, and they might get better because their energy is back, or they're less fatigued or something, whatever the case may be. That's great. That's a win. But their goals change. They achieve this, and then they say to themselves, well, what's next? And what's next? And what's next? And that happens for them, and it happens for their family, and it happens for their community. It is the coolest thing to see.
Yeah, I love this. And we're going to talk about some supplements, because you mentioned that. So it's not only just eating, but it's also supplements. But before we go there, because I really want people to know what the options are, and it's not just a blanket approach, But before we go there, I also want to connect something else, another topic that has been coming up a lot in my inner circle and in the people who are following me. They're saying, Annette, I'm dealing with this specific problem, and it's eating disorders. Now, eating disorders is kind of a large title for many different varieties, and it comes in different shapes and sizes. So compare that or bring us to that part of how this also affects by when we heal the gut microbiome. How does that change eating disorders?
Right. So eating disorders, you're right. It's a big umbrella term. It could be anorexia, it could be orthorexia, it could be bulimia, it could be non-specified eating disorders. There's a variety of them. But think about what we just talked about. Signals generating at the level of the microbiome in the gut, the second brain, that are coming up to the brain and the head and determining how we feel, our mood, our ability to relax or be tense or be energized or be fatigued, all that kind of stuff. Those signals are very, very similar to appetite signals, to cravings. We know that cravings can come from the gut. We know if we feed the gut a particular thing. I joke with people all the time. I say, if you fed your gut Doritos every day, you would grow a population of bacteria that thrives on Doritos. And then when they get hungry, the signal they send to the brain is interpreted as, Doritos would taste really good right now, right? So that's an example of these bacteria changing your appetite, changing your cravings. But like we just discussed, you can change them back the other way. So there's really early stage research now building on this idea of the gut-brain axis being linked to mood states like depression, anxiety. Early stage research linking the same kind of neurochemistry to eating disorders. And so how does that happen? Is it that something in our environment damaged the gut, damaged the microbiome, and so now we're sending strange signals that are interpreted in a strange way in the brain, so our eating behavior is now strange or disrupted? It could be something like that. It could be that we haven't been getting the good nutrition. That is still being teased out a little bit, but what scientists are finding is that these eating disorders that we used to think were just a brain issue, but now we're realizing are absolutely a gut-brain issue.
Yeah. And so many times people think, okay, a therapist is going to help me work through this. And I agree, there are elements in our background, in our history that have contributed to it. But I've also noticed just within my own self that, yes, there were some words that were spoken that we believe that weren't true. But there was still an eating issue at the same time. So what we were eating at that time contributed to a bad microbiome, which made it more logical, as we believe, to believe that lie about ourselves. Now, it may sound a little bit convoluted in what I'm sharing, but it's a matter of what we think and believe in connection with what we eat.
Absolutely. In fact, so that right there, what you just described in that is really well said, because what we've been just talking about is the gut sending signals this way to the brain, but the brain can also send signals this way down to the gut. And so if we're stressed out, or we have a mindset that is not in the right place, or we're telling ourselves stories that are not true and are detrimental to ourselves, those bad stories can send signals down to the gut and can literally change what grows in the microbiome. It's a two-way street here. And this used to be very theoretical until about 2 years ago. A group at UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, did a really nice series of studies to document exactly that stress in the brain can change what grows in the microbiome. Disruptions in the microbiome can not just change the signals to the brain, but can actually change the wiring of the brain, what we call brain plasticity. And so both of those can go in a detrimental direction, or they can go in a positive direction. And that's what's really exciting about it, is that we can use these natural therapies to take people in a different direction. And like you just said, help them be a better version of who they were born to be.
Yeah, that's exciting. All right. So let's jump to the part where it's like, okay, what can we do to escalate or to exponentially grow a healthy microbiome besides, okay, I'm eating salads, I'm doing smoothies, I'm checking all the boxes. My grocery cart looks amazingly green and colorful and alive. No more boxes and cans filling it. I've reached a certain point in my health. And this is actually my story too. So for years, I I started eating healthy in 2003. I lost 60 pounds. It was great. My health just went to a new level, but I still had this hangover of a depression, just kind of like this cloud, just partly, it's like a partly cloudy day. It's not like a totally cloudy day. I could totally function, but it's just partly cloudy. It's like, man, just that one bit. And then I started making changes that you suggested. And that's what I'm excited for you to share with people. And then after 4 months, it's like, cloud's gone. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I like the Annette that I knew I was, but I had not yet seen for a long time. So share with us how supplements make that, partly cloudy day become just a beautiful sunny day.
Right. So well, you just led me right into that. So you were doing all the right things and you got yourself to a really good point compared to where you were before. Mm-hmm. And what the supplements did was that last piece of the puzzle. It really brought it all together. So the supplements, if they're properly formulated, so we're talking about bacteria in your gut. It's not that you just go out and get any old probiotic supplement that are healthy bacteria. You want to get the ones that are going to deliver the kind of benefit you're looking for. So we know there are specific strains of bacteria that will help with depression, or other strains that help with anxiety, or other strains that help with stress and resilience. So, if you're trying to get a mood benefit, you want to get some of those strains. You're probably less interested in the strains that help with constipation or diarrhea or something like that. Even those are those are beneficial for those effects, but there are specific mental wellness associated strains. Same thing with fibers. There can be fibers that can specifically feed the bacteria that make the serotonin or the dopamine. There are specific phytonutrients from, apple extracts or pomegranate extracts or grapeseed extracts that we know that we can give to improve the signals that go across the gut-brain axis. So we can get very targeted with the supplements to really give you that sort of like precision nutrition dialed in effect of, all right, you're doing all these good things. Let's just put the cherry on top of the cake. I know we don't want to talk about cake as we're talking about good nutrition. You get the idea that it can be the last piece of the puzzle. But for some people, we can use it as the first piece of the puzzle, because if somebody is overwhelmed and just says, Annette, I get it. I hear you. I know I need to eat better. I know I need to, move my body more. I know I need to, be more mindful and meditate and get my mindset right. But I'm exhausted. I have brain fog. I just can't, I've got too many things going on. You can sometimes use the supplements as the first thing and say to people, look, we can improve your motivation a little bit, and then maybe you exercise more. We can change your appetite signals a little bit, and then you'll be more inclined to eat a better diet instead of a standard American diet. So they can be used on either side, or I guess in the middle, wherever you are on your journey, sort of depending on what your goals are.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Now, because you work for a specific company called Amari, and that is a company that I've been using now for a year and a half. Tell us why these products are specifically an answer to what you've been teaching us. So what makes these different? You said you can just grab any probiotic. Right. You really can't just grab any probiotic. They're not all the same. Tell us why these are specific. And if someone was dealing with depression, anxiety, or an eating disorder, where would they start?
Yeah, great questions. Yeah, so I'm Chief Science Officer for Amari Global. We are the mental wellness company. So everything that we do comes back to mental wellness in one way or another. Sometimes it's lowering stress. Sometimes it's raising resilience. Sometimes it's helping with all these kinds of signals that we're talking about here. But we started 4 years ago. We've been selling products for about 3 years. They're all focused on mental wellness across this gut-brain axis. So the idea is, when we started, the new science was just emerging after decades of research to say, you know what, like I said earlier, how you feel is not just in your head, it's also in your gut. So let's focus on the gut. And we're the only company that does this. We're the only company that focuses on the gut-brain axis as a way to improve mental wellness. And because that's our focus, we are dialed in on figuring out what are the specific strains that have been clinically documented for these different aspects of mental wellness. What are the phytonutrients? What are the fibers? What are these things called postbiotics, which is sort of the new kid in town? But there are the thing that is really interesting about it is that 5 or 6, let's say 10 years ago, we could not have started this kind of company because the science wasn't there yet. There was a little bit of, stars aligning, if you will, in terms of science was ready when we started. People seemed to be ready for this sort of a message. And so, all of that aligned, and, we've been in a pretty good place. So if somebody wanted to improve their mood, we have products for that. If somebody wanted to change their eating behavior, we have products for that. And probably the place to start for most people is our very first product that we launched is something called Fundamentals. And we decided to put together the world's first coordinated gut-brain axis system. So instead of coming at this and saying, oh, well, it's not a brain problem, it's only a gut problem, right, we'll give you a gut product. That would be too reductionist. That isn't what the science tells us. The science tells us that this is a coordinated interlocking system across the gut-brain axis. So the Fundamentals is a gut product that has all the things your microbiome and your gut wants. It's a brain product to help with neurotransmitter balance and brain activation and brain blood flow. But then it's an axis product too, to help those signals go back and forth between those two brains. And that works on inflammation and immune system and nervous system and things like that. So it's a full-on system. It's 3 different products, but it's around 12 different formulas that are built across that system.
Yeah, I was pretty much taken aback when I found it and discovered it, because other companies were always piecemealing it.
Right.
Okay, you want a brain product, here's your brain product. You want a probiotic, it's like this. And pretty much what you just said. And then as I was sharing it with one of my doctor friends, and a couple months later, he says, Annette, he says, I do speaking for a large company that many people would be very familiar with. And he says, I wake up with my scripts memorized. He says, and he's in his 70s. And it's like, this is amazing. It's like,
that's great.
I've got a great attitude and I can memorize again. So, this whole gut brain, and he was already familiar with the idea and the teachings, but he had never discovered a product that worked this well. And then I had another friend, she's writing music again. She says, Annette, my creativity's back. And it's like, right, yeah. That's the whole connection. And she was doing everything right, for her health as well. Both of those people were. Right, and so right, it's just interesting to hear that.
And that's the great part about it. Like I said earlier, the science is really cool. And I would love people to watch this video and go, wow, that's really interesting. But I don't want them to just shut it off and go on with their life. I want them to go, that's really interesting. I wonder how that would work for me. I wonder what happens if I applied that to my life. And then you hear stories like that and people go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize my memory, my creativity, my resilience, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And then I remember when I was on a trip, someone was saying about their dad. They're like, our dad's happy again. We like our dad now. And it's like, okay, you're almost afraid to ask, well, what was he like before? But it's like, it doesn't matter. What matters is families are happier together, and it's like, okay, that's a big deal. And it's, right, and what a simple concept that it started in the gut.
Right.
And how the whole connection begins. So Dr. Talbot, I just thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else you want to share before we end this video?
Well, I was just about to say, you just said, and it started in the gut, and what I love about this is that the science is proving something now that so many people, our grandmothers and their grandmothers, and all the way back to the ancients, they observed it. They knew that if you were stressed out here in your brain, you saw gut problems. Mm-hmm. If you had gut problems, you had problems with your mood and your resilience. And that was observed for centuries, but we didn't know why. And now we know why. And because we know why, we can actually go in there and we can naturally adjust it and modulate it and help take people in the right direction. So it's a really exciting time.
It is. And I just want to thank you for joining us and sharing this information, because I know so many people are going to walk away from this and say, okay, I'm going to do steps 1, 2, and 3 that we just listed. And I'm going to reiterate that in the show notes down below so that you can say, okay, here's what Annette said, here's what Dr. Talbot said, and I'm just going to follow these steps and get started right away. So thank you so much for joining us. It has been a joy to have you here on The Biblical Nutritionist.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us here at thebiblicalnutritionist.com. And it is always my honor to serve you God's recipe for excellent health. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure you've hit the subscribe button and the bell next to it so you get notified when we post new videos. And there's going to be a lot more content coming from Dr. Sean Talbot. The links to today's video and podcast will be in the show notes. Now, remember, this is sponsored by the biblicalnutritionacademy.com. Biblicalnutritionacademy.com is where we host all of our courses about eating, praying, and fasting. Can't wait to meet you there in that course platform. And until next time, I am Annette Reeder, the Biblical Nutritionist. My husband's doctor was writing prescriptions faster than our hearts were beating with stress. Yet, could there be another way? Is there another answer? Well, that is when a friend suggested to me, Annette, go back into God's Word, start reading it differently, and start with the Daniel fast. Well, those words changed the trajectory of our lives. And 30 days later, we were prescription-free, 35 pounds lighter, combined total, lower cholesterol, lower triglycerides, and we knew that God had answered our prayer for greater health His way. Now, if you are praying for an answer on how to get started, I highly recommend the Daniel fast. First, go to the biblicalnutritionacademy.com website, click on the Daniel fast, and sign up. It's that easy. Plus, the link will be in the show notes below.